I'm Jack Shaw, and this is the Technology Association of Georgia Smart Grid Society's event on Georgia jobs and economic growth. In a moment, I'm going to be introducing our chairman, Anthony Maiello, to officially welcome you and open the meeting. I'd like to just briefly review the agenda with you. After Anthony speaks, is Brandon Deet here? Brandon? No, don't see him? Somebody from HIG? Okay, well, HIG is our official sponsor of this event, and if someone from HIG is able to join us before we wrap up this morning, we'll be giving them a few minutes to speak on behalf of the sponsor. And then we'll be introducing our featured speaker, Professor Deepak Divan from Georgia Tech. Then we'll have a series of presentations by the very distinguished panel we've put together with representatives from the utility industries and from providers of energy technologies in the smart grid area to the utility industry and to business and commerce in general. We'll introduce those. They'll each give a brief presentation on some of the things that they're doing of the smart grid on the economy and the potential opportunities for jobs in the economy here in Georgia. And then we'll be opening it up to questions from you in the audience. So having said that, let me introduce Anthony Maiello. Anthony is General Manager of the Energy Systems Engineering Division for the GE Energy Group. Anthony worked very hard over the course of about 18 months, starting nearly 2 years ago, to help get the notion of a smart grid society under the Technology Association of Georgia off the ground, had organized the initial meetings last spring, and stepped up to the role of chairman of the board of directors of the Smart Grid Society when we officially started operations in June. And he's here to give us our official welcome. And Anthony, would you please join us? Thank you.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me? How about you guys in the back? You good? All right. I'm not going to speak that long today. All I wanted to do, we've got a very distinguished panel here. I welcome them. They're going to be welcomed individually and speak on their own, so I won't go through their names now. But this is a very distinguished panel, and I'm very impressed and very flattered that you guys are here to do this today. A little bit about upcoming events I wanted to talk about here. If you guys have heard me speak in the past TAG events here, I don't know if I did that or not. We talked a lot about breaking down the smart grid. We're speaking in general about the smart grid lately in different events, and we started talking about, hey, let's break it down. What is distribution all about? What is transmission all about? What is demand all about? And so forth. So that promise will be held in 2010. In the upcoming events, we'll start breaking these events down into those specific categories, so we can start drilling down into the economics of the technologies and so forth around those things. But what we'd like you to do, and today's not the only day you can do this, we've got surveys, and we'd like to get your input on where you think you would like to focus on first, second, third, and different areas, like, for example, demand optimization, distribution optimization, or something other than that, and we can start scheduling those events out in 2010. We've got a show of an idea, but we want to get your input just so that we're going along the lines of what you guys want to do as well. So that's really what I wanted to say here. I wanted to welcome you as well. Thank you for coming, and I see a lot of people here that have been here before at our first, second events as well. So thank you for coming. Thank you to the panel again. And today, the discussion is going to be very lively, I hope. Please ask questions. I think we've got some questions that we're going to ask the panel as well. There's a lot of questions around the economics, around technology, lots of things out there around the smart grid. You know, the smart grid is not new, but we really don't know a whole lot about the business side of it, how we're going to sell it, the whole economic side. A little bit more, perhaps, about the technology. So please feel free, open up questions and just have a good time here. We hope to see you again. at the next event. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Anthony. And let me take a moment. I'm not going to take the time to introduce all 15 members of the Board of Directors, but if you are a member, for those of you that are members of the Smart Grid Society Board of Directors, would you stand for just a moment so the folks here can see who you are, and please feel free to introduce yourselves to the board members and chat with them afterwards because we would love to have your input and your assistance in helping to get the message out about the smart grid. And now I'd like to open the program up by introducing Dr. Deepak Divan. Dr. Divan is the director of the Intelligent Power Infrastructure Consortium, and he's a professor of electrical and computer engineering at Georgia Tech. He's the IPIC, or Intelligent Power Infrastructure Consortium, is a industry, utility, university consortium that's been formed to provide a focal point for academic teaching and research in advanced power technologies at Georgia Tech. Deepak's been with Georgia Tech since 2004, and he came to Tech to create a program in applying advanced power electronics and related technologies to power systems, as well as related defense and industrial applications. He holds 32 patents. He's published over 200 technical papers, including 12 prize papers, generally regarded as one of the world's leading experts on the smart grid, and I think you will find a dynamic and entertaining speaker, so please welcome Deepak Divan.
Well, good morning, everybody. If I can find where everything is, we'll be off to a good start. It's a pleasure to be here. Given that this is an economic focus in terms of economic opportunities for smart grid, might be wondering what a professor is doing out here. But I think if nothing else, I could try to frame the discussion because it is about technology. It's about application of technology. And we do have a world in transition. I had made a similar presentation a few weeks back at a Smart Grid Technologies workshop that we had organized. And I guess that's one of the reasons that I'm here. What is the smart grid, and why do we need a smart grid? If you really go back and look at it, the EIA, as recently as 2004, made a projection which kind of indicated that really nothing had changed. And as far as 2030, they were still projecting that you were going to have about 2% renewable penetration. Everything was going to be pretty much the same. And if you look at where the limits to growth are coming, I mean, generation, really there isn't much limit to growth. Transmission, there isn't. If you look at the utility industry itself, I mean, it's really not a hotbed of industrial of innovation. Less than 1% of its R&D is income is spent on R&D. Really what it is it's a regulated industry. It's an entitlement that everybody, you turn on the light and the lights have to come on. They focus on providing reliable and low-cost service, and they succeed very much. So, given that, and given the fact that smart meters and outage management systems and GIS and DSM and all these things have been there for, 30 plus years, what has changed? Why do we call this a new era of smart grid? Why is there all this excitement about this? One thing I will kind of, maintain out here is that if we go on with business as usual, if we look at smart grid as really, another way to spend a lot of dollars and vendors to make a lot of money, okay, and if we kind of pitch it on the fact that you're going to go from 3 nines reliability to 6 nines reliability, and you're going to be able to turn appliances on and off remotely, and that's really the reason for the smart grid to occur, there's only one outcome, and that is cost of electricity will go up. And you may have a lot of people who are going to be upset because energy cost has gone up. So something has changed, though. Okay, we are spending a lot of money. I mean, we just got the SGIG grants were awarded. People have come up and are going to put their own money on it. And we're seeing renewable portfolio standards coming in. So there's a lot of different things that are happening. And I think it's worth taking a step back and trying to see, did something fundamentally change? or is it really just a hunt for government dollars that is prompting this whole exercise? So let's take a look at what the major drivers are out here. So we've got, oil imports are certainly a big thing. If you look at energy independence security, that becomes a big, impetus for doing something. We do have sufficient coal and natural gas to last us hundreds of years, so that's not driving it. Climate change certainly is driving it, and, Copenhagen is underway right now, and it seems to be a pretty raucous meeting out there. IPCC targets are really not going to be achievable with any normal incremental development that we end up doing. We're seeing RPS mandates become coming down as national mandates. 26 states already have it. We're seeing that wind and solar, are 80% of new generation that is coming on already. So that kind of tells you where the trajectory is going. Carbon cap and trade seems to be around the corner. The automotive industry is running into a brick wall. We've now, seeing that biofuels are almost at a price parity point with petroleum, and we're seeing tremendous work going on in EVs and PHEVs. So there's a lot of stuff going on. It's not very clear, what comes out of this picture, because every group out here is trying to maximize their share of the pie, and they'll take nothing else, in passing. So I want to kind of come back and say, okay, let's suppose that one of these industry groups is successful and kind of gets to a position of dominance. Where does it take us? So if you look at the U.S. transportation scenario, okay, on the one hand we have business as usual, internal combustion engines continue to dominate. Where do we end up with? We see that hey, from a resource perspective, land, water is kind of nominal. It's not a big problem. We see a lot of waste heat being emitted because, all this fuel you burn, 80% of it goes, towards doing nothing that's useful. We have 642 megatons per year of carbon emissions and $248 billion a year in petroleum imports. If you move to a biofuel world, you find that, hey, the petroleum imports have gone away, so security and independence has improved. GHG emissions have gone away, but if you look at the resource use perspective, you're now using about 72% of the U.S. land area for food and fuel. Okay, that's just not sustainable. That's not something that you can actually do. And waste heat has actually gone up. If you move to switching the transportation sector to electric cars, what you find is, yes, you get security back. Land and food use has really improved dramatically. But what you do find is that greenhouse gas emissions haven't gone down substantially. If by some magical wand you can wave and you get everything powered sustainably from wind and solar, what you find is that resource use improves very, very dramatically, and that's one of the reasons why I think we're trying to head in that direction. We just did a paper in the IEEE Spectrum magazine last month, and kind of did a projection not just from the U.S. but on a global basis, trying to understand what the impact would be if we could get everybody to an aspirational prosperity level that was comparable with the U.S. or with Europe. And what we found is that, if you do business as usual, you have about 17 billion tons of carbon emissions per year that continue on. If you move to a more balanced portfolio, you can bring it down to about half. But if you move to a biofuel world, you need 190% of the land that is available on the earth to actually meet the energy requirements, and 170% of the water. And this is with the best technology projections that you have today. If you move to an inorganic energy world, okay, land, water, resources become sustainable. Carbon emissions become sustainable. So I think there's a really good reason, if you start looking at scaling, if you start looking at where we should be going. Do you want to move to a world where you don't have any headroom for growth, where economic growth becomes stymied, where your resources are completely being utilized? So if you look at the major opportunities that are coming, under the business as usual scenario, we have essentially, we can say 30% load growth. If you just project that over 30 years, you find that there really is no barrier to growth. I mean, this is where we were heading, and you don't need a lot of the smart grid activities, necessarily to enable that. On the other hand, if you now start putting RPS mandates in, you need 500 gigawatts of new generation to be added on with a high level of variability attached to it. If you go put 30% of the car fleet on, you need another 500 gigawatts to handle that. And if you want to reduce energy consumption through demand management and through real-time pricing and everything else, you need another 500 gigawatts that you want to access. So if you put all these things together and try and say, okay, even if I don't go to 100%, just go to 30%, okay, I now have 3 buckets of 500 gigawatts that I need to handle in some way, and can the present grid actually handle that? And the answer is no. And that's really the main driver for why the smart grid becomes important. Some of the challenges that we find is really control and communications, which is seeing a big emphasis. Energy storage is a very big component, and really smart management of load and sources and everything else. That's the third element that needs to do. When you listen to the media, it almost appears as if the smart grid is nothing but AMI and automated meters. It's a lot more than that. It really connects with everything from consumer device control to the generation control to being able to manage variations in production, in the way you use energy, microgrids. All of these elements actually come back and become part of the smart grid. I kind of break it up into a couple of very simple elements. One is, the first thing that has to happen is you go from dumb use of electricity to smart use of electricity. So that's meters and real-time pricing and all the management and market functions that we have. Second layer is you take all the dumb assets that we have out there and convert them to smart assets. The third is, we have a reactive response. The only way something happens is if, the lights go off, somebody gets a phone call and something has to happen as a result of that. That's reactive response. So you want to go from reactive response to proactive response. And the key technologies that make all these things happen are kind of scattered between transmission, distribution, between generation, between storage and power electronics, sensors, cybersecurity. Just about all these elements have to happen. And only if you do all this together, you come to, I'll say it's more than a smart grid. It has to be a smart and controllable grid. If you're just smart, you may know you're falling down a cliff, but if you can't do anything about it, that's not very useful. So all these elements really have to be there. Some applications, the chart on the upper right shows you what happens today when power flows from Wisconsin to Tennessee. You think it's going to flow along a path you want to. You really can't control it. It flows all over the place. Okay, to be able to ship a green electron from a particular generator to where you want it, I think has some really important market significance, as you move to a carbon constrained world. So there's a whole bunch of applications, and they span everything from, meters to cars and integration of, V2G type of activities to solar and wind variability, addressing that, energy storage. These are all elements that fit within the smart grid. So benefits, I think we've talked about. You can increase the amount of renewable penetration. You can enable a market that is much more dynamic and it allows you to squeeze more prices out. Encourages competition. You can reduce infrastructure investments. You can improve asset utilization. You can enhance energy security and independence. Of course, I think it becomes one of the ways in which you can tackle climate change. Without that, I don't think you can really tackle climate change. Significant challenges exist. The biggest one is cost. And if you don't address the cost issue up front and find offsets for the cost that is going to go into the smart grid, it's never really going to get there. It's my contention that without electric vehicles being put into the mix, you're not going to have an ROI model that's going to be simply based on the smart meter that's going to make these things happen. Important thing to kind of watch out for is, we are going to be moving towards making sure that all carbon costs are internalized. And as you do that, that's going to create a whole new set of dynamics in the energy market. So, my conclusion, I think we're moving towards an increasingly electrified world. The existing grid has to be upgraded to a smart and controllable grid if we're going to meet RPS mandates, if we're going to increase EV penetration, and we're going to reduce GHG emissions. Smart grid is a very wide topic. We shouldn't kind of, bracket it too narrowly. Implementation of the smart grid is going to really allow a lot of sophisticated market functions, and that's really where the competitive juices are going to start flowing. But overall, if we can't find the cost offsets, it's going to be a very, very hard sell. So I'd say, yes, we all want to spend the money because that's what we want to do as vendors, but we need to kind of look at the problem holistically. Thank you. Questions later.
I think what we'll do is we'll save the questions and include those with the rest of the panel at the end of the session. So again, let me mention our sponsor, HIG Ventures, has been very supportive of the Smart Grid Society, and we certainly appreciate their help. So let me take a moment to introduce our panel, and we've got a series of speakers here, and they're actually going to speak in the sequence that you see them from your left to your right. So let me just briefly, if you'll just raise your hand as I introduce you. I'm not going to go through the full biographical background. You have that on your handout sheets. But first, Ivan Erlob. Ivan is the Executive Director of the North Carolina Sustainable Energy Association. He'll be talking to us about some of the things that are going on in North Carolina that we may want to emulate here in Georgia. Then Michelle Mandala Freeman is a Vice President of Marketing and Product Management for Landis & Gyr. She'll be followed by Bob Ray, who is the CEO and President of Flint Energies. Now, for those of you who are not familiar, Flint Energies is a member of the Oglethorpe Power Corporation, EMC. It's a local EMC that covers the area around Macon, Georgia. Then following Bob, we have Ken Van Meter, who's Director of Business Development for the Enterprise Integration Group at Lockheed Martin, which focuses on energy in general and the smart grid in particular. And finally, we're pleased to have Mr. Chris Womack, who is the President of External Affairs for Southern Power. So I'll ask the panelists, if you would, starting with Ivan, if you'll just come on up one at a time, give your brief presentations, and then let the next panelist come up. At the end of the panelist presentations, I'll come back up to present some questions and open the session to questions from the audience and moderate a panel discussion. So Ivan, if you can kick things off for us.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me? All right. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. As noted, I'm from North Carolina with the North Carolina Sustainable Energy Association. And what I'm going to talk briefly about is North Carolina and the Southeast and our challenges that we've addressed largely through public policy to try to drive a market in North Carolina. And smart grid is a recent issue that has risen in our market. In North Carolina, over the last few years, what we've seen is the number of green energy jobs. The way we define those are energy efficiency and renewable energy industries, and inclusive in that is high performance building and smart grid. In 2007, you can see here, roughly 5,400 jobs in this space through an industry census we conducted. In 2009, up to 10,250. And given the policies that we have on the books and how they're driving the market, and some likely small additional changes in public policy and regulation, we're projecting that by 2012 we'll have about 25,000 jobs in these industries. And this is a narrower definition than most of the job studies that you're used to seeing from centers like Pew when they talk about green jobs. They include a lot of things we did not. So why is this happening in North Carolina? This slide and the next slide is essentially a list, and I'm not going to read them all to you, of various highlights of policies and or regulatory decisions that have been made in the state of North Carolina. And the reason these are important is because each one created an opportunity. They either addressed a barrier that maybe a single company was aware of and made our decision makers aware of, or our regulators or our utilities were facing difficulty being able to do what they wanted to do in energy efficiency or renewable energy smart grid. And they each also then represent, after we make a change, creating a green power pricing program was a fantastic learning opportunity for our state that then parlayed into improving our interconnection standard, informing our dialogue on net metering, informing our dialogue on where should we be building out our transmission grid, and really driving a dialogue about what are the benefits and costs of introducing energy efficiency and distributed generation on the distribution grid. So a green power pricing program, like Georgia has, is actually a wonderful source of data to inform several venues of dialogue in public policy and regulation. In 2007, the thing that North Carolina is perhaps most notable for right now in the clean energy or green energy space is that we did adopt a renewable portfolio standard law. While that has driven a lot of job creation and increased investor confidence in our state market, and as a consequence, we have seen more private investment flow into our state. I'd like to stress that many policies on the preceding slide came before the REPS, and we had existing firms, several hundred of them grow in the state. 33% of our firms in energy efficiency and renewable energy transitioned from some other sector that was not energy related because they started to find opportunity, and perhaps they were struggling in one way or another in the industry they were in. A fantastic example is manufacturing. There's many areas of manufacturing where we've been bleeding tens of thousands of jobs for going on a decade now in North Carolina, and we're all kind of in the same boat throughout the Southeast. We each only have a few minutes, and so I look forward to the discussion. I'd like to then just wrap up this intro with this slide. And I have a series of slides actually going back to 1999 up to now a projection to 2012. What these circles, what these targets or rippling out circles represent is that over time what we've seen in our own state and regionally is the adoption of policies is driving market locally, and the social networking that occurs around realizing the barriers, talking about the barriers, learning together, and then going out, affecting a policy change, and then measuring what that policy change has done back in the marketplace on the ground, and how local government behavior, how public-private partnership behavior, university engagement on energy issues changes, we start to see the ripple effects expand out geographically. And we see a lot more interaction and networking across economic development regions, across counties, across jurisdictions of state agencies as they do their own strategic planning and how are they going to participate in our energy economy or try to get out of its way or help it. And those circles now, to be fair, there should maybe be squares on top of this because there's a lot, or lines, to draw the interrelationships between states. Because now we are experiencing a lot of dialogue with other states in the region, and we're learning from each other. We're learning from Georgia's experience, and Georgia, I think in a lot of ways, is learning from North Carolina's experience. And we can both accelerate our progress toward job creation, identifying economic development opportunity in the clean, green energy space through pursuing innovations together, doing research together, informing each other's policy development and pursuit, and just strengthening the social networking that's going on across the public and private sectors between our states. So that's just a dive in for North Carolina, and I guess we'll get these slides available. So, and if you have any questions about any of those particular policies, I'd be happy to talk about them. Thank you.